In 2021, Hyundai changed perceptions with the Ioniq 5, an electric crossover like no other. Fast forward a year and they're about to do the same again, this time with an electric sedan like no other. This is the Ioniq 6. This addition to the Ioniq lineup is based on the Prophecy concept, but whereas that was a sports coupe, this more closely resembles a sedan or saloon, or as Hyundai describe it, a streamliner, which takes inspiration from the cars of the 1940s. From the front, it's very sleek, very simple, very different to the Ioniq 5. And from a distance, the cars look like they're almost not in the same family, except for when you start to notice these very distinctive pixel-inspired LED lights, which, as you get closer to the car, show off some very curious detail. For example, the Ioniq 6 badge tucked away in the headlight cluster. I'm also a big fan of what they've done with these black straps that run along the top and bottom edge of the bumper. These very cleverly hide some of the car's various sensors, including the parking sensors and the adaptive cruise sensors tucked away just at the bottom at the front. These, by the way, are electronically deployable vents which open and close to increase or decrease the amount of cooling as required by the battery and the motors. The side is definitely one of this car's most interesting angles. You can see it's very much lower than a typical crossover. It's a saloon, but you can kind of see where Hyundai get their streamliner inspiration from, particularly in the way the roofline swoops down aggressively at the rear. The wheelbase is also enormous, 2.95 meters, which is not far off a small SUV, 20-inch wheels, and I love this design element here as well. You have these translucent camera pods which take the place of traditional mirrors and are connected to screens on the inside of the car. And then, I find this particularly fascinating, the Ioniq 6 doesn't have the same amount of slashes and cuts as you find on the Ioniq 5. It's far more sleek, far more smooth, and on the whole, quite impressive, I think. The back of the Ioniq 6 is probably the most interesting or contentious element of the design, depending on your point of view. The thing that I love most about it though is when you view it directly from behind, these rear haunches look absolutely enormous, almost making it look a bit like a sports car. Speaking of which, it's got two separate spoilers, one just at the top of the boot lid and then a second acrylic glass effect spoiler which is backlit, again with more pixel inspired elements when viewed from above. When you look at it from the back though, you can see it resembles a really thin LED light bar. Down here on the lower level, lots and lots of pixels, and these do a really fascinating dance or animation when you switch the car on or off. At the lower level, on the Prophecy concept, this was just a big array of LED pixels, but this looks more like a stretched diffuser complete with these LED fog lights and reverse lights. It's not going to be to everyone's tastes, but the fact that it looks like almost nothing else on the market makes it, to me, really appealing. So the Ioniq 6 is very interesting from the outside, but it's also fascinating in terms of the interior design as well. The first thing to mention is that it's full of all the usual sustainably sourced materials like fishing nets, instead of floor mats, you got recycled PET and all the other stuff you'd expect from a car built by a manufacturer aiming for sustainability. But it also looks really cool and also distinctive from the Ioniq 5. For example, where that car had a floating center console, this has a fixed center console, which doesn't let you play footsie with your passenger, but it does have other advantages, particularly this wireless recharging mat for your phone, USB port, twin cup holders, and all of the controls for your doors and windows directly on the center console. So what's on the door? Well, not a lot, to be honest, apart from this really nicely designed speaker and some really well integrated ambient lights, which look really, really nice. And weirdly, a translucent door pocket, which I think it kind of works. In terms of the technology, well, it's very similar to the Ioniq 5, but there is one key difference. These screens look a bit more premium than the ones you get on the 5. I particularly like the way that it has this aluminium border around the entire thing, which just makes it look slightly better integrated than before. Another point to note is that the steering wheel doesn't have the Hyundai logo directly on it. Instead, they've replaced it with a set of 4 LED pixels, and these do serve a purpose. They actually show you the level of charge in the battery and your charging status. And by the way, if you open the charge port around the rear, you'll also see when you plug it in, a little LED that tells you when the car is charging, which is actually quite useful. In terms of practicality and space, that 2.95 meter wheelbase really helps free up a lot of space in the cabin. I've got tremendous amounts of leg room in this car, decent headroom in the front, good headroom in the back, but perhaps slightly less headroom as a result of that sloping roofline. But on the whole, yeah, I like it in here. In terms of core specs, Hyundai haven't divulged that information as yet. The purpose of today's video is to get a taste for the design, but the car will be based on the same platform as the Ioniq 5, so that should give you a clue as to the battery sizes, ranges, and motor configurations you might expect. So, the Hyundai Ioniq 6, the company's streamliner-inspired sedan/saloon. Very interesting piece of design. Will it move the game forward and make as big an impact as the Ioniq 5? Well, only time will tell, but I for one think it's very cool. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. But as always, don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll see you again very soon.